Welcome to a very special edition of Establish the Million. Welcome to a rousing start. I'm Mike Leone here with Drew Dinkmeyer. Thank you to all our subscribers who are watching this, and thank you for everyone checking us out the first time. Drew and I are going to roll through some tournament strategy for Turkey Day. We're also going to spice things up. I'm going to attempt to tout, to produce, and to run a drinking game all at the same time. We shall see how that goes. I will explain the rules of the drinking game in a little bit, but first, let's throw it over to Drew. Drew, what are you drinking for the show tonight?
I'll crack it, but I'm drinking a Cigar City High Lie IPA,
dude,
which is my favorite beer. Again? There's some weird stuff going on with like the.
Do you have your green screen on?
I don't, so I'm like quite confused.
That's wild.
It's like the Matrix over here with my beer. I don't know what's happening. I guess it's because it's the green can. I don't know.
Yeah,
you're drinking the hard stuff.
I think you have the green screen setting on. Busted out the Johnny for the show. Someone is saying no sound. Type in the chat if you can hear us or not, just so I know if that is a user-specific issue or not. Okay. Poured that drink a little hot. Didn't mean to. Before we get started, first, I already said thank you, but Thanksgiving week, but serious thank you to everyone who supports us. If you want to continue to support us, smash the like button. Also, throwing up a link here. Go to establishtherun.com/Black Friday. We have lots of sales going on. We have merchandise for subscribers that you can get. All that good stuff. And now the rules of the drinking game. So I'm going to throw up some words on screen that if Drew says we drink, Drew's going to put the blindfold on.
I've got a scarf as a blindfold here at my parents' house. Just finding anything that I can make work for a blindfold.
All right.
I just need a cigarette before I play CJ Procise. This blindfold and the cigarette.
If Drew says any words that are on the screen, I apologize if you're listening in podcast version. You should really check out the YouTube version. If Drew says any of these words, we drink. It's that simple. I will flash a little, hey, drink, just to remind you in case you forget. Again, here are the words that if Drew says, we're drinking. So we might be in trouble. So Drew, you can undo that blindfold.
All right.
The rules of the drinking game have been made known.
All right.
Let's get into this. Okay. So generally, we recap last week on these shows if you're new to them. Great recap from last week. We both lost. Keenan Allen owns our children and any potential future children. So that's it. My second note in our Turkey Day outline was like, let's just rage for this show, Drew. So we're going to rage. But we start with a theme of the week as well after we do the outline. And I was really excited to go super galaxy brain on late swap stuff. But we lose the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. You can't get as crazy with late swap because there's just like only so much to do. But Drew, why don't you kind of walk us through how you're thinking late swap?
Yeah, it's so frustrating because the 3-game slate is so different from a 2-game slate in terms of what you can do with late swap. When you have the 3-game slate on Thanksgiving, what I like to do often is from the first game, I'll kind of expand my player pool out a little bit more, and I'll play some plays that might be a little bit thinner on the whole, in the hopes of if I run into one of those thin plays, chalk up the rest of the lineup the rest of the way. And so on a 3-game slate, I might have played someone like, I'm trying to think through who would be really thin. I guess like Jesse James, second tight end for the Lions, who's probably going to carry no ownership. But if he caught a touchdown with the scarcity of the tight end position and the value of touchdowns, all of a sudden, like you're playing ahead from the field with a really low owned play. Or if you in general just run into the right combination in the first game, you can start to make decisions. And then on the other games, you can get away from that. With just a 2-game slate, it's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do because there's just not as many options and there's not as many pivots, and you have to soak up more of your roster spots with the first game in general.
It's also harder to tell where you stand. I mean, we did this a few weeks ago with DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson, when there was a bunch of chalk running backs early. We got contrarian on that Detroit-Washington game. We immediately knew because the other chalk running backs failed that we could go chalky with the Arizona Buffalo stacks in the late set. We did that. It was successful. But this week, maybe you have some middling performances, but it's only 2 games. The Dallas-Washington game could stink. So it's different when you know you need 90th percentile outcomes and you know if you get them or not versus, hey, this guy did okay. You might know relative to the other players in the early game, but it's hard to kind of overthink it as far as the late game is concerned.
Yeah, I would say easy things that you can do in terms of thinking through late swap with respect to like cash games or just like small differentiations. Really easy things if you feel like you're playing in head-to-heads and you're behind. And I feel like we should do cash games because the guys who did the established show before, that was basically a tournament show. I don't know what these guys were talking about. Michael
They
Gallup.
gaslit us.
They're talking about all our plays, so we should talk about how to handle cash games. And so if you're playing from behind, easy pivots that you can make that at same position that you're picking up ownership leverage. Gibson to McKissic, real easy one on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you can do the same type of thing. You can, if you're really far behind, you can go like Zeke to Pollard or something like that and try to galaxy brain stuff. But you've also got like McLaurin, who's probably going to be pretty highly owned, assuming he's good to go. I think he's listed as questionable, but we all think he's going to be able to play. You can go McLaurin to Amari Cooper, CD Lamb, Gallup, any of those guys. You're picking up ownership leverage there. So those are kind of like very easy, quick things that you can do, but it's easier to execute in head-to-head situations or situations where you're playing like slightly from behind. It's really harder to execute in big tournaments where it's harder to tell, like you said, Mike, where you stand after one game.
Yeah, and as far as big tournaments, let's talk about those now. We'll talk more small field stuff when we get into specific plays, but I think it's a good slate to sort of outline, ideas for tournaments, whether you're using an optimizer or not. I know a big question people have is salary left. I'm going to throw it to you to give some overarching ideas. Well, I actually ran through some simulations for this slate, and I have some interesting notes on salary left, but I'll throw it to you for overarching ideas while I double check that.
Yeah, so some overarching ideas is just in general, if people are out there using an optimizer for a 2-game slate and they're using it in the same way that they try to use it for a 10-game slate or whatever, they're making a lot of mistakes. And they're making a lot of mistakes that are going to lead to heavily duplicated lineups. And so first thing that I would say is maximum number of offensive players versus your defense. You need to basically like uncheck that or allow, I don't want to say unlimited, but close to unlimited. Like I think there's scenarios where 3 guys in a 2-game slate can go up against an opposing defense and still work out. Those scenarios involve the opposing defense getting
Sorry, drink if you're listening at home. I was a little slow on that one. Go ahead, Drew.
3 guys going against an opposing defense. You can basically count on the fact that the opposing defense, if they score a touchdown, that generates an extra possession for the offense, and you go ahead and you get that. I feel like I want to participate in the drinking game, even though I have no.
Well, you have to drink. Yeah, you have to drink. You do have to participate.
Okay,
you just don't know the words. I made too many words, and I have to keep checking what they are.
I also tend to talk a lot, so I apologize if any. We assume no liability. If anyone
no liability. This is of your own choosing.
I feel like HR and Taylor is going to be in my DMs very quickly. All right, so no maximums versus your defense. Maybe max 3 if you want to kind of do that, but uncheck that box on optimizers that can get you into trouble on 2-game slates, both in terms of not being able to generate enough lineups, but also not being able to meet lineups that are unique as well. I also think on a 4-game slate or a 4-team slate, 2-game slate with 4 quarterbacks who generally don't run a lot, all of your quarterback stacks should be at least double stacks. I don't see a reason what just happened.
Yeah, you missed a couple drinks in there. You missed 2 of them. Continue.
Just keep drinking.
I'll just give you your count at the end of your spiel.
Fine. Fair. So you want double stacks for sure. And if double stacks is a drink, man, woof. So you want double stacks, you want at least 2 pass catchers with your quarterback. You want to I would consider maxing 2 or 3 wide receivers or tight ends without a QB from the same game. Because I think what you don't necessarily want is lineups that end up looking like Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Jordan Akins. Like those can be okay with Stafford, but I don't think they're great with Alex Smith or Andy Dalton type situations. So you might want to think through that type of thing as well for an optimizer rule. And then the minimum salary constraints, Mike, I'll turn it over to you. You can just tell me how many drinks I have to catch up while you're
I think just one more. You grouped some words together. I'm only counting as 1 drink so that we can stay functional for the whole hour. Just one. So the salary stuff, I checked. So I basically simulated the slate 20,000 times. Of the lineups that occurred, 96% of those lineups left $300 or more on the table. 96%. So you really can't be afraid to leave salary in this slate.
Would you automatically make that a constraint then? Like, you're getting more unique lineups just right off the bat from doing that.
So essentially, if there's more than 5% of the lineups are taking up 49.8 or more, that's more than what it should be, right? So, and it's almost a lock that's going to happen. So yeah, I think right off the bat, one of the easiest ways to get unique would be, just less than 49 easily. So
and you can only sim DK, right? No FanDuel.
Yeah, I didn't sim FanDuel. It looks like FanDuel surprisingly is a little tighter, but it's still really loose. And that's another issue with getting a game canceled because they didn't price this like a 2-game slate. The prices would have been different. So where it gets tricky, you mentioned.
Was that a motherfucking Mackey Award winner in the chat there?
Yeah, it certainly was, Mr. Silva in here. Where it gets tricky, and I don't want to get too into the weeds. I know we're still talking macro, but you mentioned having pass catchers in the same game and, wanting to pair them with your quarterback. We could see Deshaun Watson just tear up this slate via efficiency. And then one of these other teams have multiple pass catchers get there in like these really inefficient ways where they're racking up catches is something
on DraftKings. On FanDuel, yeah.
FanDuel harder to do because you need the touchdown. So it's less likely you get a weird combination of stacks on FanDuel with the touchdown dependency. But on DraftKings, you could see where, McLaurin and Logan Thomas maybe get there. But then, you're still going to want 2 pass catchers with your quarterback, I think, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
If you're stacking at least 2 pass
catchers. At least 2. I think
you'd go up to elite. 3 definitely.
3 is fine. 3 is fine. I'm debating whether 4 is fine. I think 4 could work with Houston, but no one else. I think. Kind of working through it because Kute, Akins, Fuller, Cooks, I think could work, or Duke. So I think 4 could work with Houston, but I don't think anybody else.
Detroit is the one I'm wondering if they get behind and they have to throw a lot and they rack up catches. But last week against Carolina, they just refused to do that. So I don't know.
They scored 0 points. They scored 0 points against the Carolina Panthers, which is really impressive. I had another note there. Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I got a lot of questions on this on Twitter, and the truth is I don't have an answer because I haven't run my stuff yet. But people have asked about max ownership constraints. So I talk about this a lot on kind of main slates and how I would say that generally I have a range of like 115 to 145. Let's say that's like a max ownership constraint that I will use. But on a 2-game slate, obviously, like if I did that, I literally couldn't generate lineups. So like, what is the number that's the max ownership constraint? And I kind of think that you need to do one of 2 things. You either need to play with it and kind of look at like, what is the total ownership that I'm comfortable having that I think allows me ways to differentiate. That's not like straight 2v2s. Every lineup you're going to play is going to have to be 3v3s or 4v4s. Like, you can't avoid that in a 2-game slate. So that number, I think you need to like tinker with and like run and just look at the lineups and like kind of gauge it. And it's a feel thing, and it's hard to give good recommendations on. The other thing that you can do instead, and Fantasy Labs, the optimizer partner that we use, has a feature where you can, in the custom table, create like an at least 1 player below this projected ownership, or at least 2 players below this projected ownership. And looking at the pool of players, you might consider like at least 1 player below 20% owned or something like that, or like 2 players below 20% owned, and you'll start to generate more unique lineups that way. And the only reason we talk about unique lineups on a 2-game slate, it's kind of similar to Showdown, is just in general, if you have a lot of lineups that are duplicated, the expected value of that lineup immediately depreciates. And the example that I give is if you were to play a 10-man tournament and first place was 100% of the prize pool, which a lot of these tournaments are basically like that top heavy, that it's like a reasonable facsimile. But if you were to play that and you played it where 9 people had the same exact lineup and you had a different lineup, your expected value would now be exactly half of the prize pool, because if you beat them, you get half of the prize pool. But if you played a lineup that was more duplicated, immediately your expected value goes down. And because I'm a few beers deep, I'm not going to do the specific math, but hopefully you can figure it out at home.
You owe us a drink, Drew.
Okay.
Want that to be known. And also, someone asks along that vein, at what mark is leaving too much salary on the table? The thing you have to think through, I don't know what the exact answer is, but you need guys to get there on raw score, not just value, because it's close to a play whoever you want slate. So, I'm messing around with teams where I play Stafford over Watson, and at the end of the day, I need Stafford to beat Watson straight up, basically. I don't need them close on value. I need the pure winner. And I think that's true across most positions. Now, if you build an expensive tight end team, there might be some leeway, but otherwise.
Well, the guys talked about, I think it was the last 2 games late we had, that Ricky D, who's a very good professional player, extremely professional. How is that a drink already? Good Lord. What did I even say?
I left it out.
Okay. He's a very good professional GPP player. He won the Millie Maker solo on a 2-game slate. And I think Andrew said he left like $5,000 on the table. And I remember it was literally a 1v1 versus like a train, like a big train. And I feel like it might've been like DeMarcus Robinson versus Tyreek Hill or something like that.
He did 2 things. There were 3 obvious running backs that were more expensive. He played Kenny and Drake over them, which he won on the huge Drake run while running out the clock, which was exhilarating. And he played DeMarcus Robinson over like the John Brown, McCole Hardman mid-tier receiver. So
but I feel like the winning lineup was legitimately like DeMarcus Robinson over Tyreek Hill. And there was like a train of those lineups, not a big train, but like 15 to 20 of those. And so the point is like, how much is too much in terms of leftover? I really don't think there's a number on these 2-game slates in the context of like, at least if you're playing guys who are like on the field and like most of your lineup is players that are pretty good plays or solid plays. And then if you're leaving like 5,000, 7,000, whatever, because you're coming down from 1 or 2 plays that are going to be heavily owned, I think that's fine, because I think the uniqueness creates an add value in these really large field tournaments, which is what we're talking about right now. When we talk about like the contest that Mike plays in terms of like smaller field, high stakes stuff, I think it's a little bit different because I don't think you have to be quite as extreme, but you still want to try to be different.
Yeah, there are a lot of weeks where I feel like my contests are a little bit easier to know how to play than the MME stuff, because the MME ownership gets flatter. So the leverage spots in my stuff, the smaller field stuff, which is usually, when I say that, I generally mean 200 to 400 man fields or lower. But this week, because again, the issue where you need guys to outscore players just on raw score, it's definitely a little bit trickier. I have some people asking about stacking and double stacks, triple stacks. I do think a viable strategy in the small field is, onslaught one of the games and hope it really gets there and only take 1 or 2 guys from the other game and just basically say, hey, this game goes nuts, this game sucks, and I win if that happens. Even still, you probably have to get the individuals right. And that's the other thing too about this 2-game slate. We on our Saturday show, one of the themes sometimes is you don't have to hit the pure nuts, right? If certain things happen, you don't have to hit the nuts. On a 2-game slate, it's a little harder to say you don't have to hit the nuts. You almost have to,
especially with some of the contest sizes. I mean, even the smaller contests that you usually play are a little bit larger this week, right? Because like they expand the fields for Thanksgiving. Like they want these slates to be big featured slates, and so I think it's a little bit tougher on this slate as a whole to figure out the right approach. And losing that Baltimore-Pittsburgh game really, really kind of, shoeboxed us in terms of trying to figure out the right ways to play the slate. Now, my question to you is on that onslaught idea. Do you think that onslaught idea in the contest that you usually play, let's say like the Juke or the Dome or whatever, do you think that onslaught idea with Houston, Detroit being the onslaught is there room for that to still be unique enough, or is that going to be duped heavily?
So I think there's room because Zeke and McLaurin are going to be so high owned that if you didn't play those two guys, I think you'd be unique enough. Could be wrong.
Zeke, McLaurin, Gibson in the defenses, right? That's the ownership from the second game.
Yeah, and you'd probably want the defense because
you need one of those defenses, and you can maybe play one of those three guys, but not the other two.
Yeah, you can't onslaught Houston, Detroit, and then play the two of the chalky one-offs in the late game. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah. So, Drew, what's our next section here?
Our next section is stacks.
Drink!
Oh, man. I can't believe you made stack as a drink. That's just
it's only when you say it. I've said some of these words like 20 times. I'm like, thank God it's just for when you say it.
That's a struggle. All right, so let's start with what's your favorite stack on this slate?
So, and I'll reference some of the simulations I ran because I think it's pertinent. When you take into account correlation, the lineups that seem to repeat most often are obviously Houston lineups because Watson, if you look at our projections here, for FanDuel, for example, with salary not mattering that much, he projects 5+ points more than the other quarterbacks, 7 points more than Dalton and Smith. You get almost no rushing equity from Stafford, Dalton, and Smith. So, and then on top of that, you've got Cooks and Fuller as sort of the obvious stack and some cheap plays. So that's the clear-cut one. The one that I'm probably most into for tournaments would be Stafford, where our projected ownership on both sides has Stafford similar to Dalton and Alex Smith. And I think he's really a cut above those guys. So, you're just asking so much of Dalton and Smith to pure outscore Watson. So I guess I'd say Stafford and Marvin Jones, who we'll get to at wide receiver. Some of his stat candidates seem to be some of the more obvious leverage plays in my eyes anyway. So what I'm torn on is if you play Stafford, you want the game to go. But then it's like, do I play Cooks and Fuller without Watson? Or do I say I'll stack Detroit and then play
Duke Johnson?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you definitely want Duke.
Play Duke Johnson in those situations. I think this is where reference some of your sins. So I am going to reference the Sims. Thank you, Fleeter Overzet, who congrats to you for still being standing at this point in the day after that earlier Fullcast performance. Shout out to Tuttle. The thing that I'm struggling with on this slate is in your Sims, Mike, the top repeating lineups, the lineups that won most frequently in the 2-game slate on DraftKings, 90% of those lineups had Deshaun Watson. And so here's my thing. If our projected ownership of Deshaun Watson in this like 55 to 60 range is right, in MME, I kind of am actually okay being over that. But my concern is that it's like 65 to 75. And if it's 65 to 75, then I'm kind of on the wrong side of that. And so this is where like I'm really struggling with how to figure out my exposures in MME, because I think it's very clear that Watson, not only his upside individually from the other quarterbacks, but also the clarity associated with his stack partners, the upside of those individual receivers, makes it very easy to see how that is the winning stack on this slate. But I'm trying to figure out how much is the field going to play it. And so I'm kind of like middling this a little bit. Like when we talk about Alex Smith, I'm probably just not going to play any of him. And I'm probably going to work my way down. But where I end up in terms of total ownership on Deshaun Watson is really a struggle for me, because if he comes in at 55, I literally probably want like 80 or higher. I feel like that good about it. But if he comes in at like 70, then I feel like the leverage is on the other side of having like a little bit more of the Dalton Stafford guys. And so I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and in all of the lineups, he was in about 55% of all of them. It was just, if you limited to the top 150 repeating lineups, the ones that came up most frequently, that's when stuff condenses a little bit to the better plays, and he was in 90% of those, but 55% in all lineups. And then Stafford was in about 20, which was about the same as Dalton and Alex Smith combined, which is, again, why I like Stafford if you are going to venture into the pivots. And I do think, maybe leaving Alex Smith off makes sense. We think right now we've got Dalton, Alex Smith projected with similar ownership on both sites, but we think if people are playing with optos, that could flip a little bit and have Alex Smith slightly more owned simply because his pass catchers project a little bit better, particularly McLaurin, and that might force people into those stacks if they're playing with.
This is the I'm a few beers deep. I've been noticing that during the course of the season, optimizers have been manipulating kind of ownership in GPPs in general, and the idea, like, it's hard to fathom that casual players picking their quarterbacks on Thanksgiving Day are going to choose Alex Smith. Very hard to imagine. But I do think, and I think, Dallas is a more public team. Andy Dalton's a more known quarterback. So I think Andy Dalton would get picked a little bit more by the casuals. But I think the people are jamming 150s because they set stack rules. And this is one of the things to understand about optimizers and stacks in general. Sorry.
Double drink. That's a double drink. I'm going to flash it. That's a double drink for everybody.
And there's the thing about them is, that you have to understand that there's two ways for ownership to condense. There's one way where the quarterback is projected really, really highly, and his wide receiver options are projected just okay. And as a result, you're going to get a lot of that quarterback, and it's going to pull up the wide receivers. But the other way is the skill players are projected really highly, and the quarterback is projected okay. And in this instance, where Andy Dalton and Alex Smith are projected similarly, the tiebreaker on ownership, in my opinion, would go to which skill players project better. And if you look, Zeke obviously projects really well and will be heavily owned, but so will Antonio Gibson. So then you go to the wide receivers and the tight ends. If you go to the wide receivers, McLaurin projects better than Cooper and Lamb and Gallup. That's going to condense ownership. If you go to tight ends, I think Logan Thomas projects as a better value than Dalton Schultz. And so I think Alex Smith is going to end up being owned more than Andy Dalton. And these are like small things. But for me, it's enough to just be like, I'm Xing out Alex Smith, because my thought process is, how does Alex Smith have upside that differentiates from the chalk that he's playing with? Mm-hmm. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how Alex Smith has a big game without Terry McLaurin or Logan Thomas having a big game. Most likely Terry McLaurin, honestly. And so if I just play Terry McLaurin, I can capture most of that upside anyway. So that's why I'm thinking about removing Alex Smith entirely from my player pool.
Okay, normally we do a section called good chalk, bad chalk, and then we do contrarian ideas. We're going to go position by position and morph that all into one, given that it's only a 2-game slate. So we talked about the quarterbacks. Let's go to running back. And it looks like Zeke is going to be very chalky. DeAndre Swift, if he plays, we're assuming he plays. I feel like there's a good chance he plays because they ruled a bunch of guys out. They're leaving him questionable. It seems like he just has to get through the final step of concussion protocol, and he'll be in. And he's coming off a concussion too. You're generally not too worried about the volume being limited, and he was unleashed in that Week 10 game. If we look at him on the season, DeAndre Swift has played about 41% of the snaps, 30% carry share, 12% target share. Not the best. Targets are great, and of those carries, he has been getting the high value touches, which is nice, meaning the goal line carries. But Week 10 was unleashed. 73% of snaps, 76% of the team's carries, 15% of targets. Huge workload. Dome player, good matchup. Just a great
dome player.
He's in a dome. It makes
both games are in a dome.
He's still in a dome. Okay, domes matter for the players I say it matters for. If you're athletic, it matters. Okay. So buzz off, Drew. You know what? We're drinking for that.
We're still smashing the like button. That's going to be up forever on the show.
Oh, yeah. I should change that. Oh, there's just too much going on, man. All right. Long story short, Swift is our top value on both sites with a somewhat conservative projection, quite frankly. Thank you. Tube Sock says dome players matter. And I agree. Dome players matter.
Dome lives matter.
But so I think Swift and Zeke after that big game, I was watching a stream with Peter Overset and Ben Gretsch earlier where Gretsch kind of pointed out that Zeke, even though he had that good game, he's not seeing the huge targets he was seeing earlier in the year, and the snap share is down a little bit. Pollard's been worked in. So I could see some reasons to fade him. The guy I was really excited about when I thought it was a 3-game slate was Duke Johnson. I thought he'd go under owned with Gus Edwards taking ownership. Now I'm not so sure My inclination, Drew, is that Duke Johnson definitely comes in lower owned out of Swift, Zeke, and Antonio Gibson. Gibson's had some good games in a row. I think the Duke Gibson comp is good, where Gibson, people are chasing the game log a little bit, but his role hasn't changed. He's a 2-down back. He happened to be in a great spot last week. Burrow gets hurt. They run from ahead. Awesome game script. Week before that, he scores 2 short goal line touchdowns. I could see, if you think there's going to be an ownership disparity, I'd rather take the Duke side and hope that we just get more efficiency. I mean, if you look at Duke Johnson last game, as bad as it was, 5 targets, 10 carries, and he he averaged 1.5 yards per carry and 4 yards per target, which is absurd. It's not great, but Procise was mixed in, but not a ton. So I think it's a good bounce back spot. Duke against the Detroit defense that is one of our worst in terms of DVP against running backs. So I like Duke. Of the chalk that I think is the worst, I think it's Antonio Gibson followed by Zeke Elliott, and I think Swift is probably the best of this chalk, even though Patricia, is Matt Patricia and does weird things.
I think that's right. The other thing that I'd add to that is I think, and I wouldn't go as far as saying like you need to create a specific rule for this, but I think almost any lineup that doesn't have Deshaun Watson, you should have Duke Johnson. The thing with this, like, I think we're very confident Houston's going to be able to put up points, right?
Yes.
Like we're not ready to bet against Houston's offense on this slate relative to the other 3 offenses on this slate. Even if Houston has a down day, I think they're going to be pretty competitive with the other 3 offenses on the slate. I don't think they're going to completely fold. And so I think, and again, I wouldn't go as far as putting a rule, but what I will do, for example, is in the Fantasy Labs Optimizer, there's a correlations tab, and I'll make lineups that don't include Deshaun Watson get a 20% boost or 30% boost or 15% boost, whatever boost you want it on Duke Johnson. I think that made sense. Drink? Okay.
Yep.
I think that made sense. But basically the idea being, I'm not creating a hard rule on this, but what I'm saying is if I'm not going to play Deshaun Watson, I at least want the running back, because the path to Deshaun Watson failing, right, is a lot of rushing touchdowns that don't happen to be him. And Duke Johnson's that guy.
So Drew, another potential rule you could make, and maybe this is too restrictive, but if you want to start parsing down the things you need to win, mention Antonio Gibson as a 2-down back, mention Zeke Elliott's targets dropping. What if you max one of those guys with the idea that you want the guy who has the positive game script and you want to fade the guy in the negative game script? And along those lines, I think JD McKissic is a really strong play. Someone I was kind of mocking on the main slate last week, just I didn't think the ceiling was there. But on this slate, if he gets 15 DraftKings points or 12 to 15 FanDuel points, like that might be enough to make him RB2 or a flex play. Like he might get there on raw total points in a negative game script. His target share, I mean, I almost in our projections have it somewhat conservative because like I feel his last 4 games, he has a 24% target share. He has as many targets as Terry McLaurin.
It's stupid.
And I have him for an 18% target share because I cannot true up in my mind giving a running back
who's a running back with a split role.
With a split role, I can't do it. But and that's and we just mentioned they've had at least one of those games last week was a positive game script game. The Detroit game wasn't, where he really racked up targets.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the thing is, Mike, Alex Smith makes miracles happen, right? Like he healed his own leg. He now can make target shares of 25% happen for running backs who play like half the downs. He makes miracles happen. And so as a result, a best ball stream, Lauren's
crunk.
Lauren is crunk. So anything can happen. I think that rule is too restrictive for MME, but I think it is a good hand building rule in terms of max one of Zeke or Gibson. I think in MME, you might want to create that negative correlation where if Ezekiel Elliott is in the lineup, decrease Antonio Gibson's projection by 10, 15, 20% or whatever, and do the same reverse of that. But I don't think in MME fields, I think there's still certainly the thing about a 2-game slate that you have to remember is the overall ceiling that's necessary to win a GPP is lowered, right? Because like the running backs can be so bad that 50 yards and a touchdown from each guy ends up being enough to be in the winning lineup.
Like, I mean, Zeke and Gibson can score 11 points. Drew, we got an influx of viewers. We probably got a Silva bump somewhere. So throw on that blindfold and let's remind everyone of the rules of the drinking game. Okay. So if you came
I gotta
late,
like unwrap this blindfold first. This was much easier a few beers ago. Give me a minute.
I mean, it's not, look, you did it. Congrats.
No, I'm just saying time wise.
If Drew says any of these words, it's a drink. He has to drink. I have to drink. I will flash the drink symbol up. If I say those words, you don't drink because, there's too much bias with me knowing what the words are. And by knowing, I mean, I have to keep checking every 10 seconds because I forget what they are. But you know what? Let's do it. And I'm out. So I'm going to pour. I've got some Johnny Drew. Why don't you show your magic can that like
my magic can that disappears amongst my fake green screen. Cigar City High Life, a great Tampa-based brewery that I fell in love with back when I worked in finance before my DFS days with a Tampa-based company. I went to this brewery and loved the beer, and they got bought out by maybe Budweiser, maybe the big distributors, and so they're like available everywhere now. So, are you okay over there, Mike?
Yeah, my ice is dwindling, man, and Oh, also, I didn't mention. I gotta show the Barry Sanders, Drew. I don't know why you're not a jersey guy. I just feel like $1 million when I put on these really nice stitched. Sexy.
Well, the reason I'm not a jersey guy, Mike, is that I'm a single man in my late 30s, and from what I've felt from the women around the internet is that men wearing jerseys are not particularly, in their line of sight.
You need to change your player pool. You've got the wrong player pool. Okay, so back to running backs. So I think we agree Duke and McKissic are both interesting plays. We kind of agree on the order of, Gibson probably the worst of the chalk, relatively speaking, then Zeke and then Swift to follow.
Do you want my crazy running back play?
Well, this is what I want.
Do I give it on stream? Do I give it on stream?
Give it on stream. MME, I know what it is, but
okay.
MME, just go
everybody lean in real close. Okay. What we're gonna do in the optimizers. We're gonna set a rule that lineups without Ezekiel Elliott, they increase Tony Pollard's projection by 50%. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make sure that we have a little bit more Tony Pollard than the field, just in case. Short week for Zeke. Been battling some hamstring issues. Tony Pollard broke off that long run against Minnesota. We're just gonna make sure that we have enough Tony Pollard that we're a little bit ahead of the field. And the way we do that is in the optimizers, we set a rule that we have a little bit more exposure by bumping the projection for Tony Pollard whenever Ezekiel Elliott is not included in the lineup.
I have two things. One, you have to drink like 3 to 4 times. 2, nothing gets me more hot and bothered than Dink's optimizer rules. So Casey says that was 12 drinks, and I'm being kind to you with the 3 to 4. So, and thank you, Hanif. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Get a girl who wear a jersey with you. I mean, I'm buying my wife a Stephon Diggs jersey for Christmas. Better believe that. Okay, so there's also your boy CJ Procise was playing more snaps. Silva doesn't think this is likely, but at least says there's a small chance that with the injuries to Kenny Stills, injuries to Randall Cobb, it's possible they see more 2 tight end stuff. It's possible they do a lot of things. One thing that's possible, both Duke Johnson and CJ Procise theoretically have pass catching chops, and they could see the field at the same time. Any CJ Procise in your MME pool?
Oh, 100%. First of all, I'm a long-term CJ Procise truther, and I have played CJ Procise at every possible game format that I could, Dynasty, season-long, DFS. Whenever there's a chance, I've played CJ Procise. And so I'm not going to miss this chance to potentially get even on CJ Procise after racking up and accruing all those losses over the years. So I will say this. If Bill O'Brien was still in charge, I would be jamming Duke and CJ because that dude buried Kike Kute like nobody else. I mean, I drafted Kike Kute in dynasty leagues because he was young, and I just used the age model for my draft guides. Mike knows this very well. I just choose based on the youngest possible player, which has not worked out very well with Marquise Brown and now Kike Kute. But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I gotta say, Andrew Wiggins and Adam Levitan have conspired against me.
You love the olds.
And behind my back, they have constructed a combination age model and game log model that in some priority, based on game log and age, they think determines what a player's projection should be. They've conspired against me.
It's a good model. It is also known as the public ownership model. That they haven't admitted to yet, but it is also known as that same model. But yes, I think CJ Procise can be in your pool. The same type of rules that you do for Tony Pollard, you could do for CJ Procise. I just think they're a little bit less effective in terms of a leverage standpoint because I expect Ezekiel Elliott to be much more owned than Tony Pollard. But I mean, there are paths that Tony Pollard comes close to Ezekiel Elliott, and if that's the case, it's monstrous leverage. I
threw up an erroneous drink because I got confused, but I think that counts. I'm loving your green screen making your can bricks.
I don't understand. How do I have a green screen if there's an actual background? This is like my parents.
Dude, the technology.
One of the guest screens.
Know if you have a background or not. It's anything that's green. You have it turned on in your settings. I don't know what to tell you.
All right, I got to look at my settings.
No, you don't. It just makes
I'm going to log myself off now.
Bricks for
no reason. It's going to be great. I'm going to figure out my settings.
Logging out's not going to change it.
Michael, I'm very good with technology. There's nothing to
Two truths and a lie. That's the lie. Okay. Final two things at running back. I swear to God, it's the final two things. Then we'll spend an hour at receiver. Okay. I'm going to ask them both at the same time so we don't get too hung up. Antonio Gibson and JD McKissic in the same lineup is one. And the other thing, if Swift is out, what are you doing with Adrian Peterson, Kerryon Johnson? This is a speed round.
If Swift is out, I'll probably play a little bit of both, but not a ton. Gibson and McKissic in the same lineup is fine on DraftKings, probably not fine on FanDuel.
Kerryon Johnson's the smash. No, is because if we had a 3-gamer, I'd be like Kerryon over Gus Edwards is the play. But now you need such a high score.
Mike, I feel like you need to get it out. Just get it out. Get the Gus Edwards take out because it's what you were ready to do all week long.
Was predicated upon the masses playing a 4K Gus Edwards on a loose pricing slate. He doesn't catch passes. Their team total is the lowest it's been in years. I mean, and he's playing the Pittsburgh run defense, and he was going to be mega chalk. And not, we don't get to take advantage of those small pea-brained people. So whatever. Let's go to receiver. Good chalk, bad chalk at receiver. So I think the chalkiest receivers, it's going to be Fuller, Cooks, and McLaurin pretty clearly. On FanDuel, we do have Fuller coming in kind of a cut below Cooks and McLaurin. And that's, as we said, a rare case where the pricing is a little bit tighter on FanDuel than it is on DraftKings. But I think we agree, Drew. I don't know if I have a specific bad chalk of those, but I think Marvin Jones is going to go under owned on this slate.
McLaurin's the bad chalk. I mean, he's not bad chalk and he's fine, but he's the bad chalk of this whole thing because if you think about it, the confidence levels that we have in the quarterbacks in terms of generating upside and points are certainly there on Houston. They're not there in Washington. McLaurin's also questionable. He's battling an injury. It's a short week. He's also a little bit overinflated in projection systems because, as Mike said, projection systems can't possibly give JD McKissic this 22-24% market share of targets that he's had. So as a result, McLaurin's soaking up some of those. So I think if you were to pin me down on one of these three receivers being the bad chalk, I think it's Terry McLaurin.
I don't know. Derek Carty's been talking about Terry McLaurin in a dome. He's been waiting
in
all year for this moment. Yeah. So I'm a little scared. But
I feel like if Carty was on the show, we would drink to anything in a dome. So I'm going to drink.
Okay. Drink. But the target share for McLaurin started off about 25% to start the year, really started to get inflated. And then since Alex Smith's taken over, it's come back down to earth. He's a great play. He's extremely talented. He's succeeded with whatever's been thrown at quarterback with him. But there's a difference between a 25% target share Terry McLaurin, a 30% target share McLaurin.
There's a difference between a quarterback that is bad and will throw the ball more than 15 yards and a quarterback that is not as bad and refuses to throw the ball more than 15 yards. And that's really the difference, is the fact that McLaurin's targets are coming down not because of anything McLaurin's doing. It's because he's playing with one of the most conservative quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Kerryon runs like he's got a piano on his back. Thank you, Evan. That I could have used that information before I drafted him in like the 10th round of these dynasty leagues.
That's what's fun. Yeah, Mr. Running Backs Matter Truther, Drew. What do you do with these running backs that you thought mattered 2 years ago and now they're like on the opposite end of the spectrum?
I mean,
all right, we've moved on from running backs. I'm sorry, I apologize. Talk about Marvin Jones. Did you talk about Marvin Jones? I don't think so.
No, I didn't talk about Marvin Jones. So I think, I mean, if you look at this slate in the context of where's the ownership going to be and where's the potential to like leverage the slate as a whole, and if you acknowledge that you feel like Houston's going to score points regardless, then you have to acknowledge that Detroit is either going to be in positions where they need to keep up or they're chasing. And you've got no Kenny Galladay. You've got no Danny Amendola. As a result, you're probably going to get ownership on TJ Hawkinson. Nobody likes to play old players. So here we are. It's Marvin Jones week, baby. This is the best leverage play on the slate, by far, in my opinion. By far.
If you look at Marvin Jones and Amari Cooper to an extent, what you need to happen on this slate, they've got to outscore one of Cooks, Fuller, McLaurin. You know, it's not like they need to be the highest scoring receiver on the slate.
You're getting paid like 3-1, 4-1 on that.
Yeah, and they just have to outscore one of those guys, you know? And then, you know, if you look at the other Dallas guys too, no one's going to play Gallup because they don't need the cap relief. And I know he's been so bad, but he's a big play threat. And if we look at the last 4 weeks for Dallas, Michael Gallup leads the team in targets the last 4 games. And it's not pretty.
He did, but like some of those DiNucci and Garrett Gilbert games, I get it.
I'm going to add context.
They count for your selective sampling. But Gallup, I don't think Gallup is going to lead the team in targets. That's all I'm saying. I think he's a fine leverage play. He's really cheap. I think you can play him and leave a lot of salary and still be fine. But I think that point is irrelevant. Erroneous on all accounts.
James Kenny asked, can you talk about 3 max adjustments you are making on this slate? And I talked a little bit about that earlier. You know, as it's specific to the receiver, though, I feel like either Amari Cooper or Marvin Jones you should be playing. You should not be playing Cooks, Fuller, McLaurin, who aren't even correlated, you know? I mean,
yeah.
Give me McLaurin and Cooper and hope that game goes off, or give me Cooks, Fuller, and Marvin Jones and hope that game goes off. That's what I'm thinking of. A guy we got burned on last week, and I'll take the mea culpa on this, was Marvin Hall. And I was okay jamming him because I felt like it's an uncertain situation. We think he's going to step into targets with these guys out. He didn't step into them like we thought, but we got the ownership we wanted. This week, we've adjusted. We've scaled back the expectation on Marvin Hall. But still, with Amendola out, with Kenny Galladay out, Hall, who we think missed some snaps at the end of that game due to injury.
I think he got dinged.
So
I just before your mea culpa, or I guess it's after your mea culpa, but I don't think it was like, I think it was a really good play. I played him in like my main tournament lineup that I felt really good about, honestly. And I correlated him with DJ Moore. And so DJ Moore got there, but Marvin didn't. But Marvin's a big play guy. And naturally by Marvin Hall, I'm talking about now, naturally by his salary alone, just on a loose pricing slate, the ownership's not going to get there just because people are uncomfortable leaving salary. So I think he still makes all the sense in the world. I think he's a really good bring back in a contrarian way on Watson stacks that are obviously going to be very, very popular, but they're probably going to be very popular with Swift or Hawkinson as the primary bring back, not Marvin, not any of the Marvins. And so I think this is the week of the Marvins.
Yeah. Marvin Jones, by the way, 50-yard touchdown called back last week on, ticky-tacky legal formation penalty. Just an FYI there for the people that want to invest in game logs, but other people won't see those game logs. Then
hidden game logs, the secret game logs,
hidden game logs,
the penalty redacted game logs.
Dallas receivers. Lamb seems like fine. He seems neutral to me as far as ownership upside. Cooper seems like the best play of the trio to me.
I think that's correct. I will say this, that Andy Dalton was looking a lot more towards the middle of the field than the outside of the field when he's been playing at quarterback, and Amari has been running a little bit more outside routes. But I mean, Amari got tackled at the 1 last week. And if he doesn't get tackled at the 1, it's like a completely different week in general. And CeeDee Lamb like made an absurd catch.
Was that on that drive too?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
That drive they settled for a field goal. As an Andy Dalton stacker, I can talk very, very about that game. But I think Cooper is the best play of the group because I think he's going to have similar ownership to Lamb, and I think he's a loanership. That's when
how
you're
did I
low
not make ownership a drink.
When you're low owned, it's loanership. Yeah, but I think he's going to have similar ownership to CeeDee Lamb. And I think he projects a little bit better. So I think he's a stronger play. I think Gallup is clearly a good like MME play. I really don't know that I'd play Gallup in hand builds. It depends on kind of how many hand builds you're doing, but I think he's like right on the fringe. I think you can get enough difference with a Cooper or a Lamb over like a McLaurin or over a Fuller or a Cooks that you don't necessarily need to go there. But I think he's like right on the edge. And I do think Cedric Wilson is viable in MME pools. I do think that is
and Showdown
certainly the case. Yeah.
More I think about it, I'm probably going to go heavy on Detroit, Houston, even though it's chalkier in hand builds, see where I'm at, but like really get probably pretty contrarian on the Washington Dallas game. Whether that means I make Watson or Stafford stacks, I haven't decided yet, but Marvin Jones probably in there. People do want to talk about some of the peripheral receivers. So on Washington, it's sort of a mess because Dontrell Inman's back. Yeah. And it's also a mess because Cam Sims has been playing most of the snaps, but Steven Sims and Isaiah Wright have had similar targets despite playing like half the snaps of Cam Sims. So it's sort of a total mess, and you have to guess whether or not, is Inman coming back to his primary role? Silva was saying on the Established Show, he kind of totally forgot about Inman, and he's wondering if he's just
he was saying that he thought Inman had gotten demoted, which I think is a legitimate assumption, but it's difficult to know when he's healthy. The thing that I'll say about the Washington secondary pieces is I think all of these guys, and this is maybe an opportunity to talk about the differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. I think all of these guys are a little bit better play on FanDuel than DraftKings. And the reason being, because on FanDuel, the scoring system, the importance of the touchdown, there's no bonuses, there's no full PPR, it's just half PPR. The importance of the touchdown can make it so that you get some like random low-owned player into the optimal lineup. On DraftKings, it's a little bit harder to do that because if you get like 1-4-1 as your option in terms of the box score, that's 7.4 points, right? And somebody can beat that with 3 for 45. Right? They don't need a lot to beat that. On FanDuel, it's a little bit harder to beat that. They need a pretty good game to beat that. And so I think all these secondary Washington options are a little bit better on FanDuel. They're all going to be very, very low owned. I would say if I had to choose among them, the guy that I would bet on most is Steven Sims Jr. And the only reason that I'd bet on him the most is just because I've seen them, different coaching staff, so it's kind of hard, but I've seen them scheme stuff up for him like in a unique way. Cam Sims has played a lot of snaps of late. Steven Sims Jr. has been kind of splitting that role with Isaiah Wright, but I think he's the more talented option. And I think there's a possibility that he eventually absorbs all those snaps. And if he does, like that's the guy I'd want to bet on.
Dude, my wife made a ton of cookies and they went for a walk. If we finish before they get back, I'm going to smash those cookies.
More incentive to wrap this up.
So, all right, Houston, we got to talk about Kiki Kuti because he seemed like he was headed for chalk, and then we get the game canceled. You don't really need the cap relief. Is he going to be owned? Because if he's not owned, he's kind of interesting. Randall Cobb got the touchdown for Houston last week, and it's a way to get your Watson stacks contrarian. If he's going to be owned, it just seems like you want absolutely no part of him. Any Kiki Kuti takes?
I think Kute. So this is where it gets like the Ricky D teams like stick in my head where it's like, what if the Deshaun Watson stacks that win this are one of Brandon Cooks and Fuller and Kike Kute? What if Kute is the guy that has the big game over Cooks or Fuller. And that's the way to differentiate from the field.
Yeah, and what's hard is, like, it's difficult for me to get there in hand builds, but then in opto builds, it's not like, because in hand builds in my head, what you could do is build your chalk team and then just say, okay, Cooks, Kuti, leave the salary, right? Build your normal team and make that swap. You mentioned how when Ricky D won, it was kind of a swap from Hardman to Demarcus Robinson, or exactly what it was, I forget, but
something like that.
But what if you just did, Cooks to Kuti, and you left the 2,000 that you're saving there, and you just left the exact lineup the same? So you're not doing that in opto builds, and it feels thin to me in hand builds, but it makes sense, like, logically, as to how you
the tough part, the frustrating part, is that this is the first game. Because if it was the second game and you had a lineup that was like an okay start, pretty clear, right? You just swap Cooks or Fuller to Kuta, and you're like, all right, this is my chance. But in the first game, it's a little bit tougher.
All right. We've talked about all we could at receiver. Let's go to tight end.
Optimizer.
Do you know the rules, the drinks now?
Well, I figured out one of them.
Deduced one of them. Okay. Everybody drink. Okay, tight end. Now, speaking of the Houston situation with guys down and just a growing role recently from Mr. Jordan Akins, who, like, Wiggins just kept referring to this dude as the Atkins diet, which was just awesome on his show.
I like it.
So Jordan Atkins diet Akins, very cheap. Does it matter? I don't know, but he's in play. And then we've also got, these guys are muddled. We have Hawkinson ahead, but he's the only tight end with any sort of salary issues whatsoever. The other guys are all very close. What's been annoying with Jordan Akins historically, whether it continues or not, we'll see. He's been the rare tight end that's been used kind of in the 20s, and then Darren Fells catches the touchdowns. Like, the historical touchdown rates on Fells versus Akins, Fells like doubles him. And Fells has been phased out a little bit. We've seen some Farrell Brown action up in here. So thoughts at tight end. Looking at this ownership, I don't see how you play Jordan Akins on DraftKings, but FanDuel, we think Hawkinson's going to be mega chalk on FanDuel.
Yeah, and by what you say, like, when you say, like, I don't see how you play him, like, 3-max single entry, stuff like that, I would definitely avoid. Obviously in MME, he's probably got to be in your pool to some extent, but I do think if you look at these guys in general and you take in the context of the slate being there's a lot of salary that you have at your disposal, and you don't necessarily need to use all of it. And this guy's going to be super chalk, and he projects pretty similar to all these other guys. And it starts to feel like bad chalk, especially at a tight end position that's extremely volatile on the whole, and a position that can basically, like, whoever scores, if you told me right now, like, any tight end scores, I might bet them versus the field in terms of total points. Like, whoever you tell me, like, you're from the future, you tell me,
easily
Jesse James scores, I might, like, immediately bet them versus the field because the position is so bad on the whole. So, especially on FanDuel, this is especially the case on FanDuel. And this is one of the things about FanDuel that I think this is a great spot to get unique on FanDuel, because so much of the ownership is going to condense on Hawk and Logan Thomas and Akins and Schultz. And those guys are the primary guys. But if you find, like, one of these secondary tight ends, you get there right out. Would you set a rule to stack your tight end with their QB?
I'm firmly on team no, and it's for a specific strategy, especially on FanDuel. As I'm looking at these ownerships, and my thought is, if I go heavy on Houston, Detroit, and I've faked Zeke and McLaurin, I want Dalton Schultz or Logan Thomas at half the ownership of TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, so I think so. Take that question apart. I think it's a good idea in general to correlate your tight end with your quarterback in your game stacks. In general, this slate specifically, I don't think it's that great of an idea, because I think likely you're going to run yourself into more ownership when you're doing that. And so this slate specifically, I would not have a rule like that. Other slates, I would certainly consider using my tight end from the game that I'm stacking in general. I never have put a rule on that has specifically said correlate your tight end with a quarterback that you're using or so on and so forth. You can do like increase projection, boost type things, but I think it's a poor play on this slate, specifically the way that slate sets up.
Yeah, agree with that. Because I mean, we quite often talk about, hey, just correlate your cheap tight end. Just do that, and that's on main slates. But this is a somewhat unique slate, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, my inclination looking at the ownerships is like heavy Hawk on DraftKings, and then heavy Dalton Schultz or Logan Thomas on FanDuel, and probably be pretty light Jordan Akins overall, and then play Jesse James on Showdown or in your MME sets on FanDuel.
I think on Showdown makes even more sense. I think he's probably a pretty good Showdown.
I don't know if you mentioned this. I think you did at the top, but just real quickly, do you want to go over players allowed versus your defense in this slate?
I did mention, but I will revisit.
Yeah,
and in general, that is one of the biggest places of a potential mistake that you can make with optimizers right now is they all come with like a predetermined checkbox of 0 players versus your opposing D. You need to uncheck that. You need to remove that for a 2-game slate. You need to allow players versus your opposing defense. And I would say allow at minimum 2 players. I would say at maximum maybe 4 players. Somewhere in that sweet spot is fine. If you choose to use 2, if you choose to use max 3, whatever, it's fine. But you need to uncheck that box in your optimizers.
That's a double. We got 2 drinks there in case you missed it and you're listening and playing along at home. If you're not, that's fine too. Okay, so we're going to do flag plants. And if you're new, this is where Drew and I kind of plant our flag. As far as plays of the week. So sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And we're also going to flag plant a Thanksgiving Day food item. So Drew, après vous.
What was that? Was that French? Are you talking French to me?
Yeah.
I will start with my flag plant being we probably highlighted this pretty strongly, but I really think Marvin Jones in so many different respects is such a good tournament play on the slate. 1, he's going to be like maybe a third of the ownership of the top wide receivers on the slate. 2, he correlates with the game that you most want to attack. He can either be the bring back on Watson stacks. He can be the stack piece on contrarian Stafford stacks. I think he's such a good tournament play. And I think, talk about things I'm thankful for, right? It's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for that illegal formation penalty, because without that illegal formation penalty, Marvin Jones ownership would probably be like 30% on this slate. But because we have an illegal formation penalty, people think Marvin Jones, this old guy, doesn't get targets, whatever. Play him in GPPs this week.
Look, I'm your Huckleberry. I'm going to talk about the Sanders jersey again. I'm thankful for this jersey. I mean, I'm going to flag my plant on everyone wearing this jersey. Look at the silver numbers. It's gorgeous. It's a work of art. All right, I'm going to flag plant. I'm going to reluctantly flag plant Duke Johnson. Like I said, my inkling is he comes in with the 4th most ownership at running back. And I think he's right in the mix with everyone. I don't think he's better. I don't think he's worse. But between, I think you're in better shape playing Duke Johnson at lower ownership than Gibson and Zeke at higher ownership. If I'm wrong on ownership, I'll take the L. But that's the inkling that I have. So I'll flag plant. Duke, did you give your second flag plant there?
No, man. I'm going in turn. I'm doing.
Well, it's correlated, so I thought maybe you.
It is correlated. I mean, Jesus, Michael. Just because you can see the notes doesn't mean you should reveal the notes to the people. But it is correlated, and I think Houston is going to be able to score in this game. But I think the way to be different in this game is to project a shootout. And so the projected shootout situation for me is correlate that Marvin Jones, Matthew Stafford, get him at 1/5 of the ownership of Deshaun Watson, I think. And as a result, you create this unique stack. You can still bring back those Houston wide receivers. You can make this a game stack, but you can do it differently with Matthew Stafford and Marvin Jones stacks.
Yeah. So my second flag plant that I have written down is Will Fuller. I'm backing off Will Fuller. I'm gonna say,
Is it Jarvis Landry time?
oh, good Lord. I'm gonna say, if you don't play Duke, play McKissic. If you don't play Marvin Jones, play Amari Cooper. It's kind of like the guys that we like a little bit less than
The secondary flag plans.
secondary flag
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah.
But let's flag play. And Casey here, who's just been crushing his flag plans, a subscriber, shout out to him. He's flag planning Marvin Hall. I didn't have the guts to do it after.
It's Marvin week.
I got chirped at quite a bit for this Marvin Hall play. That and all, what the people don't like it when you make fun of Deontay Johnson and then he goes like 10 for 100. They don't like it.
They do not like that. The people are very protective of Deontay Johnson.
Casey goes Marvin Hall and mac and cheese. So,
So I will support Casey on all Marvins with Detroit. I think those are good plays. And I will support Casey on the mac and cheese. That is my food flag plant of Thanksgiving. It is my favorite side dish of Thanksgiving. Turkey's fine, whatever. Stuffing's fine, whatever. Green beans fine. Pumpkin pie, whatever. They're all fine. Mac and cheese is the best part of Thanksgiving for me.
So in the Big Lebowski, the rug really ties the room together, right? For Thanksgiving, I like my turkey. I like my mashed potatoes. I like my stuffing. I'm a traditionalist. Douse it in gravy. The gravy ties it all together. Just gravy, gravy, gravy.
The perfect buffalo flag plant.
Okay. You know what? We've been drinking, so I'm going to open it up for like 2 minutes of questions. Maybe 5. Drew, is that okay? Can you take some questions?
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm out of beverages, but that's fine.
Okay. I'll pour one for you.
Yeah, drink for me.
Okay. Let's see. I had some good questions earlier, and then I asked for questions, and oh, this was a good. Okay. Any love for 2 tight end builds as being unique?
Yeah, I think so. I think in general, anything that leaves a decent bit of salary, and a decent bit being like 600 or more, maybe 1,000 or more, I think is going to be pretty unique. And if you go the 2 tight end route, you're naturally kind of going to get there. There's not a lot of ways to fill out the salary if you go 2 tight ends. So I think 2 tight end builds are totally fine on the slate.
Okay. Dylan asks, Duke and McKissic together too much for GPP? I don't think so, especially in MME. Hand builds, but you know what? I think it's fine, really. I think that's a really good way to get unique without sacrificing a ton of projected points.
The thing that I'd just make sure with McKissic, I wouldn't play McKissic solo from Washington, because McKissic's GPP winning performance is probably coming with Dallas generating some points somehow. And so I might use Zeke, I might use Cooper, I might use Lamb, I might use the Cowboys defense, right? But you got to assume that Dallas is going to score some touchdowns that's going to force McKissic on the field more considerably, and that's what allows them to separate. So I don't mind Duke and McKissic together, but I would make sure that I have a Dallas player alongside that stack.
And back to the tight end question, though, I just want to note, just be aware, again, we've talked about raw points. You need to not just get there on value with your tight ends. You basically need touchdowns from both your tight ends, because they need to outscore the 4th highest scoring receiver on the slate or the 3rd highest scoring running back, most likely. So just be aware of that. I think that's fine. Okay. Drew, Gibson and McLaurin lineups. That's probably bad, right? Like overall, like that's probably over-owned, I should say.
I think it's over-owned. Tim, I have not run my sets, so I don't know. If I had the answer, I would give it to you, promise you. But I haven't run them yet, so I don't know. I will say this, because I am likely unchecking Alex Smith, I am probably going to do something where I negatively correlate those 2 players, because I think they're going to be a little bit over-owned. And so I would say that my guess, total guess, but my guess is that maybe 5 to 10% of my lineups in total have those 2 players together, Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin.
Okay, Pittsburgh Bruce says his family makes crackers and gravy. What are crackers? I mean, I know what crackers are, but like,
What are crackers?
But I mean, like, are we talking like, I mean, when someone says they're making crackers and gravy, what do you think of as far as the crackers? Like biscuits? Are we?
I mean, I think of like saltines.
I feel like, I mean, I don't know. Pittsburgh Brew. I don't know if the saltine crackers. I don't know if they're cutting it for me. Okay, a couple people they're thinking Swift is doubtful. I think he's gonna play, but they're thinking he's doubtful.
Okay,
we hit on this a little bit, but I think Adrian Peterson. I'm torn because I think last week he was over-owned, but he was terrible, and I wonder if will he be over-owned again, or will people be like he's terrible and I don't have to play him? So I'm a little torn on that.
I think if Swift is out and ruled out, I think. So I'm thinking right now in the types of tournaments that I play, the really like popular large field tournaments. What percentage of people do you think are editing their lineups on Thursday morning? I would say like
I think it's probably a good 50%.
50%.
Also, biggest drinking night of the year, which DFS Twitter has done its part today, let's say, but people aren't going out as much.
Right. No, it's different, but I don't know. I'm guessing maybe 50%. Like people just don't late swap in general.
Yeah, but I think it's more than 50, but
okay, so 50, 60, whatever. I don't think it's 100. On top of that, there's so much salary available on the slate, right? So I think that if DeAndre Swift gets ruled out, it condenses the ownership on Gibson and Zeke a lot. Like a lot. Like I think those two guys might be 80% owned, something like that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to talk to Levitan, but I think Gibson's owned higher than we have him. Like, you'd be surprised if Duke and Gibson are the same, right?
I don't think if Swift is ruled out, people move to Peterson or Carrion because they don't need the salary. I think they move to Zeke or Gibson.
I guess if you're doing the old cop out, Peterson on FanDuel, where we get a little bit more touchdown equity, and Carrion on DraftKings, we get a little bit more target equity. Equity.
Was equity one of the?
No, it wasn't. I'm just making fun of myself. And I think it was Sam Hoppin who does some great visuals with us. Someone was making a joke about, maybe it wasn't Sam. Someone was making a joke about DFS players adding. I think maybe it was Justin Freeman about DFS players just adding equity to the end of anything.
Look, we're all looking for the buzzwords that make us sound smart. That's like generally what we're all trying to do.
Oh yeah, optionality. We didn't even mention optionality.
Optionality is one of our favorite words, I think both of us, but I don't think there was a lot of optionality on this slate once we lost the third game.
Christopher Riley, what is the most overrated Thanksgiving food and why is it turkey?
So turkey is fine. Turkey is fine. And maybe that's why it's overrated. I don't know about you, but like I am not in on cranberry sauce.
I don't like cranberry sauce either. I'm not in
and people love it, but I'm not in on it at all.
I
don't think it gets enough hate for what it is.
Yeah.
It's really not that great.
My mom makes a spicy one that's tolerable, but like that's the ceiling that it reaches. It's like, it's like kind of this unique that's tolerable. So I'm with you. I love meat, so you're not going to hear me blast turkey. I like to eat meat. I try to eat less meat for the environment, for lots of reasons, but like who I am as a person is someone who likes to eat meat. So, the dark turkey in particular, super good. Yeah, baked beans, kind of like if you're eating baked beans on Thanksgiving, I mean, sorry, man. That sucks, buddy.
Yeah, those have not made it into the courses at the Dinkmeyer household.
Okay. I just want to do this last question, and then we're going to shut it down. How do you adjust for total lineup ownership when playing a game with 2,000 entrants versus 30,000 entrants? So I'll tell you, my smaller field stuff, which is usually even smaller than 2,000, I make one to two very logical ownership pivots, which in this case would be the flag plants we talked about, Duke and McKissic at running back, Marvin Jones and Amari Cooper at wide receiver. And then I'll just make sure I'm very correlated with stacks and bringbacks elsewhere. Obviously, everyone's going to do that on 2-game slate, so I might be a little bit even heavier than you might imagine. That's what I'm thinking for 2,000. I'm probably not getting, like I might still play Watson. I won't touch Dalton and Smith. It'll probably be Watson or Stafford. Playing a 30,000 team, you're opening up more possibilities. You're probably opening up more salary on the table. Drew, I'll let you take the 30,000 entrance side of thing.
No, I mean, I think the total ownership stuff should not even, like, all the ownership projections around the industry are kind of built off of these really large field tournaments. So I don't think you need to consider them for your 2,000 entry tournaments. I think they're kind of irrelevant. And I think you need to be smart in your hand builds and how you're kind of associating them. In the bigger field stuff, I think that's where the ownership constraints kind of come in and they're useful. But like all the stuff Levitan's written and Mike has helped research on, like the Millie Maker and different stuff like that, they're really not applicable to the 2,000 field tournaments, the 200 person tournaments. They're useful in terms of understanding concepts, but the direct rules themselves are not applicable.
Yeah. And what's hard for MME, I mentioned I ran, the 20,000 sims for the DK 2-game slate. Zeke Elliott gets in 58% of those. Our projected ownership, 56%. DeAndre Swift gets in 58% as well. Our projected ownership, 56%. That makes it tough to make your decisions, right? Because there's enough people MMEing and doing other lineups that they're probably accurately the field overall playing those guys at the level they should be. Whereas in the smaller field stuff, Zeke Swift might be more 70 to 80, right? Maybe not 80, but 70 is one of those two is probably getting to 70. And then it's easier to say, well, that's over owned. So it's difficult, but thanks everyone for tuning in again. Thank you to our subscribers. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. Please smash the like button if you like this, because that helps us do free content. We do a free show every Monday around Showdown. Drew and I will be back Saturday for subscribers to talk the main slate, similar style to this type of show. Again, I've got the link. Yeah, less drinking though. I've got the link to our Black Friday stuff, establishedrun.com/Black Friday, which is going to give you deals as far as memberships go. If you're a subscriber, you can get some swag stuff. I believe all of our free shows for the week have ceased with this show.
This is it.
They put us on last. We're the final sales pitch. ABC, Drew, always be closing. Drew, if you would like to see what the words were.
Oh, onslaught. I don't think I hit onslaught today.
I said it like 7 times. I probably dictated these words too much to me. I should have had ownership in there. I was really kicking myself for not.
Ownership and people are dead. So yeah, I think we did well. Hopefully the people will reward the drinking game ingenuity and the fun that we had on this podcast video by smashing that like button.
Smash the like button. Got it up on the banner. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving and good luck in all your games.